This is the DVO podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is a momentous day. Today is the day we've all been waiting for. Scopely has made a huge announcement, but before we get to that, this is the DVO podcast with your host David D and this guy,
the vengeful one.
Man, today is going to be so awesome. Fresh and hot off the presses, we have a very, very special guest. We have, some of you may know him as Jiggy Jeff, Jazzy Jeff, Juicy Jeff. We just know him as Jeff from Scopely. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much. No one calls me that. I appreciate the
I guarantee you your girlfriend calls you Juicy Jeff. But
well, we're not getting into that.
And for those of you that don't know, Jeff is the guy who designs all of the recent awesome characters on this game. And it is such an honor and privilege for us to have you on this show. Again, welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and privilege to be on here. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, you can ask Davey. I have said for the longest time, man, I just wish we could get Jeff on the podcast.
Facts.
Obviously, Eric would be fun and the other, but man, like I am such a nerd when it comes to characters and their move sets and that sort of thing. And just to be able to pick your brain and think about the future of the game and whatnot. Because I know that you're into kind of the overall gameplay as well, not just characters. So really have been looking forward to this for a long time. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely what drew me to the position as well. So definitely happy to talk about it.
Yeah, man.
Cool.
So tell us a little about yourself, like who you are, how you became a character designer really at Scopely, that kind of stuff.
Yep. So I've had sort of a, I guess you call it non-traditional path to get here. I started at Scopely about 2 years ago. And before that, I was actually an attorney. So my experience on this game is also my experience in games in general. So when I started, I actually joined the live operations team, which handles sort of the live events, the mega superstars, creates the different tours that run on a week-over-week basis. And about a year into doing that, I had told a couple of people that I was really interested in character design, and I had kind of pointed out some sort of improvements that I would make on existing characters, or what I would, where I would kind of like to take things in the future if possible. And I think that kind of got people's attention, and they let me start doing it a little bit sort of on the side, and that ended up becoming more of a full-time role. And so now I'm a game designer, and I'm responsible for all character design and sort of thinking about the meta and ways to sort of either shift it or make sure that it's healthy. And I'm sure we'll dig into that a little bit too.
Okay, can you give us like a quick summary of all the characters you've worked on? Because I know you haven't done all of them, just like a couple of recent ones.
Yeah, so I took over character design when the Zombies event rolled out. The first one that I worked on entirely on my own was the Kevin Owens zombie character, who I know didn't have the greatest reputation. But then after that, I also was involved a little bit in like Doink the Clown, a little bit of his sort of rework when I got the initial design for him. And then the most recent one that I worked on was Matt Hardy. I have another coworker who has started to take over some of the ongoing character release work, because I've been working primarily now on 4-star design. And so he worked on Jeff Hardy, I worked on Matt Hardy. He's done a lot of the much more recent characters.
That's pretty cool, man. Do you personally own all of your characters, or do you have to play like regular people and collect them?
I wish that I owned the characters that I designed. No, I have a real live account that I put my own money into. I'm trying to think, my best 2 characters, I have 2 3-star silvers, Bray Wyatt and Alberto Del Rio. And those, those get me pretty far, but I haven't been fortunate enough to win the ones that I've created. I also get plenty of time to, test them in non-live environments. So, I guess I have that.
So
Yeah.
it's a little less exciting than, if we pulled it, because it's the first time we're playing with a certain character. You're like,
That's
oh,
true.
Yeah, I've been there.
But yeah, exactly.
Or, I've even if you pull them, you're like, oh, I've played this guy at max gold and now he's on level bronze.
Yeah. And by that point, I've played like 100 matches with him and run, simulations and things like that on him. And I'm pretty much done with that
Right.
superstar. So I'm ready to move on to the next one.
Ready to move on to the next creation. So, So I know you mentioned a little bit about, you worked on the live ops team prior, but I was curious, is there anything specific that maybe the players that have been playing since the global release might recognize that were uniquely yours prior to the character design?
Yeah. So back when I was on the live operations team, we kind of, the different, we call them live operations managers, would work on different weeks worth of content. And a couple that you might remember if you've been playing for a while, I worked on the Money in the Bank and the Steal the Earn. It was actually $1 Million Corporation themed week. So some of those, what I was trying to do at the time was come up with events that were different. And, for example, with Gauntlet Blitz, to me, what's fun about Blitz is trying to finish the entire thing. And you're really only going to want to do that if the rewards are appropriate and if the rewards are sort of structured in a way that gives you the incentive to finish the whole thing. So that sort of led to the idea of kind of giving nominal rewards for all of the other nodes and then giving sort of a big reward at the end. And we've, improved upon that, I think, as time has gone on. But those were some of the things that I worked on back then.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of people had mixed feelings about the Money in the Bank earn style blitz. I absolutely loved them. At the time, I thought it was finally a blitz reward that was worthy of going through hell mode. At the end, I was happy to take 1,000 coins along the way to get, possibly at the time getting 2 2-star gold tokens was a big deal.
Right.
Because the only way you could get them was in versus or maybe Sunday Night Heat if you were lucky to get 1 out of 6 chance to get the one that you wanted. So
yeah,
that was like a really worthwhile blitz. And then to go back to the other ones was like, I'll just skip it.
it was something that, like, if you weren't looking for a lot of health packs at that time, then
Right.
you got health packs, you'd be disappointed and that sort of thing. And that was definitely some of the feedback that we got and that we were taking into account for the next events like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the general idea. Any event that we run is never going to be perfect, so it's always good to get feedback and figure out how we can improve.
For sure. And then also just being able to do a variety of events so that it tailors to different people at different stages of the game and that sort of thing. So
Right.
I definitely love that change up. So it's not surprising to me that the person who came up with that is also the person that came up with a lot of the great characters from the fall that we really grew to enjoy. I guess, Mr. Perfect and Macho Man and some of those new characters from that era of the game were definitely some very powerful characters, and we'll get into some of those topics here in a bit.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So can you walk us through kind of the timeline of events between the idea of a character? So let's say you're assigned, hey, we need to make Mr. Perfect. So what's the timeline of events that goes between the idea of that character and then the final execution?
Yeah, here's the traditional sort of timeline. Traditional timeline is we have a calendar of sort of events and releases, and we plan these things out typically at least a couple weeks, if not a month or more in advance of when we're going to release a certain character. When we get that information from when we work with the live ops team. I say we now because I have another person working with me on the character design. When we get that information from the live ops team, we'll start thinking about, you know, what class and what style is this character. That's something that I don't think always has a lot of sort of significance to it, and we're trying to work on that to establish clearer styles and establish clearer strengths and weaknesses of different classes and styles. So we'll look at what class and style is the character, what are some other characters with that same class and style who have been made in the past, what worked with them, what didn't work, and try to improve upon, you know, if somebody had a reinforced gem build and the reinforced gems weren't really doing anything for that character, how can we use those in a way that makes them interesting? We've tried to do that with, I think, Triple H King of Kings, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it was Stone Cold Showboat. And so that's kind of the starting point. And then secondly, and just as importantly, is especially now trying to make sure that each new character, each new superstar has the sort of move sets and the signature moves, the finishers that players expect. Because that's another thing that with past releases, you know, there was, it seemed like there was sort of a plan to release different moves later in the sort of game's lifetime. When you don't have, you know, the Stone Cold Stunner, you have sort of $1 Million Dream or something like that.
Right.
And that's something that we got a lot of feedback on from players. So we want to make sure that the move sets are authentic, that they're true to the superstar, and that if you know, if you're lucky enough to win one of these characters, that you get the move set that you expect.
Yeah. So how do you determine the class of a character? Is it based on their in-ring persona, or is there a quota per class that needs to be met?
So it's first and foremost based on their in-ring persona. We try our best to assign them based on what they're known for, what their strengths are. That gets a little challenging when you have a character like Triple H, who has, you know, I think at this point 4 different different versions. Because then you start to, you know, okay, he's a powerhouse, yeah, he's a striker, yeah, he's a technician, but then where do you go from there? I guess a showboat. I guess, you know, King of Kings, that's a very showboat type character. So we've tried our best not to double up. We've never doubled up so far on, you know, when there's a second version of a character, having 2 of the same class. But yeah, I mean, it first starts with who they are in the ring, and then sort of secondarily, what are the class needs? Is there a shortage right now of acrobats? Are there no new gen acrobats right now? I don't believe there are any of those, for example. So yeah, that's kind of how that goes.
Very cool. So since you took over, I feel like every character has at least 2 viable move sets, which is not the case from the past. In the past, we'd have a lot of, you know, convert color turn gems into protect gems or something like that, which, you know, not terribly viable. But since you took over, there's been a lot of characters that have, you know, you can run them at least 2 different ways. So clearly this takes significant foresight. So where do you get your inspiration from for all these characters to create that kind of move set?
Yeah, so I guess to me, and you know, I'll say that with the characters and the superstars that I've designed, there has certainly been some where it's sort of there's an obvious primary move set, and that's kind of the one you go with, and there are some secondary moves that might be more situational. But what I really enjoy about the game, and I think where we can improve a lot, is really increasing the amount of agency that a player has in terms of what moves that they select before the match, what the actual moves do when they're in the match. You know, making your choices matter a lot more, both pre-match and in the match. So that's sort of been the driving force or the inspiration behind a lot of the characters designs, just making sure that, or trying to make sure that you have different choices before the match, depending on who your opponent is. That, like I said, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's like, yeah, if you have to choose gems to swap to red gems, you're going to bring that 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time. But giving players options to make their choices matter more. That's been a big component of all this.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. I think unless you're talking about, let's say, a UF Seth, I mean, even he's got a couple ways to run based on the situation and the trainers. But like next big thing, there's one way to run him,
Right?
and he's dominant, but there are others where maybe you start thinking about, maybe I want to take this character in against that guy because we have the same feeder color and that sort of thing. And that does make it a much more interesting way. I don't know if you've seen Compy and Choli's videos in the last couple weeks with their little Hell Mode challenge, where they go in with a different character for all the class tour Hell Mode nodes. So they have to pick the right one for the right situation, and they can't use the same guy twice. It kind of speaks to what you were talking about right there, where you have to think ahead of time about which character and which move sets. And I would imagine that at 4 stars, that's going to become even more viable once you start adding more moves and some of the other changes, which I'd love to get into with you.
Yeah, and I think that I'll have to check those out, because that sounds very interesting, and they do awesome work. So I'll definitely be checking those out. But I think that's definitely part of what we're going for. And I think you'll see over the next few months, especially, that there's going to be a bigger emphasis on sort of your defensive team setups. I mean, there's already an emphasis on that with like your versus team, who you set for defense, and your feud team, how you set it up for defense. But with a new feature that we'll be rolling out later this year, it'll become even more important. And I think having the flexibility to have, for example, both a defensive setup and an offensive setup for a particular character becomes, or if it's not already valuable, it'll become even more valuable.
That's exciting because, I love obviously offensive setups as much as the next guy, but I absolutely love coming up with troll defensive setups.
Yeah.
Those are the best. So
yeah, and I think
that
it's something that I think we can do a better job on sort of showing you how your defensive teams do, not just like a quick summary in versus mode of victory or defeat, but I would love to give a little bit more information and sort of like really tell you when and ideally how your defense beats somebody, because there's nothing
that would be awesome. Because I know that in the last couple of feuds, I've had setups where I really wish I could see what my opponent was dealing with.
Yep.
Because sometimes you don't really anticipate it. Vince is a dominant character to have to go against. One black match and he can get his yellows off, and it's going to hurt you, except for the fact that right now he doesn't break his loot boxes. So,
right. Yeah.
So all of a sudden, what seemed like a good defensive build, you realize that it's really not. So that would be very cool. That would be very, very cool to be able to see how that all plays out for the opponent.
Yeah, and yeah, no, I should say, since Eric's not here and he would probably slap me on the wrist, no promises on that. That's something that I would love to do and I've been pushing for, but we'll see if it actually
as long as it's heard and being considered, then
definitely
that's what we're after. So I know we've got, I don't even know how many people are listening live right now. This is
a billion.
Yeah. Reverend Wayne had like the previous record for most live listeners, but you have shattered that record. Sorry, Rev.
Excellent. That was my only goal.
So everybody wants to hear obviously about 4-star characters. So why don't we dive into that? Obviously we're anticipating the release of 4 stars coming soon. My understanding is it will be after this month-long event. It seems over the course of time, and more recently also, that it's kind of met with both excitement and fear, depending on who you ask. On one hand, we're all very much excited to explore the new ways that we can play with the current characters on our roster. They get the new move, makes them more appealing to level up. On the other hand, there's a fear that there might be a lack of balance in the meta, or more of a disparity between the players. So on a broad level, what are some of the objectives that you'd like to see with 4-star characters as it relates to in-match gameplay, as well as overall game balance?
Yeah, so definitely in terms of within 4-star gameplay, meaning 4-star character versus 4-star character, we are definitely looking for a lot more balanced fighting, a lot more balanced matches, I should say. When you get to 3 stars, and especially the 3-star gold, a lot of matches end up ending in 2 turns. You charge your 2 colors that, you know, put a bunch of random gems on the board and then do a choose move that charges your 3rd move, which you tend not to even need, because the 2 moves end up finishing the match and it's over. And then, you know, while that tends to feel good because you won a match instantly and it's, you know, it's a win, that tends to get, in my opinion, a little bit repetitive, and there's not a ton of the sort of player agency that I think is really interesting and healthy for a game in general. So at 4 stars, a couple of the big principles are, you know, better balance, really try to increase player agency, make your choices in the match matter a lot more. When do you use a move? When do you, where do you select gems? Do you go for a big combo right away? Do you wait? And obviously that comes with it, a certain amount of balancing, both in terms of like your HP, your gem damage, your move damage. And we're accomplishing that in a number of different ways at 4 stars, including, generally speaking, your health, your HP is going to scale more aggressively at 4 stars than your gem damage and move damage will, to allow for ideally a little bit longer matches where your choices can matter more, so that you're not just, you know, wiping a guy's health bar immediately. That's one of the big things. Obviously, that with a new power tier, you're going to see that, you know, your 3-star characters will struggle against the 4-star characters, and I think that's natural. To what extent that's true, that's still sort of being the details on that are being ironed out in terms of the balance there. But I think you can expect it to be mostly comparable to what you've seen in the past. I think if you go from, you know, 2 stars to 3 stars, there's a couple other key differences. You get an extra trainer slot, for example. You're not getting an extra trainer slot at 4 stars. So there are some differences that make that jump even bigger in some ways. But I think in general, it's going to be difficult to take in a 3-star gold guy and take down your standard 4-star bronze guy.
That makes sense. It's good to hear about. It sounds like, again, you know, with the health scaling more proportionally than gem damage and move damage, that sounds like, again, extend the match, which I guess also emphasizes characters that are going to have the ability to recycle moves. If it sounds, am I correct there?
Yeah, I think that both characters that recycle moves, as well as characters with strong submission, if not quick charging submission moves, will also be very valuable, just in terms of keeping your opponent's moves at bay, I guess. I have a feeling those will be pretty significant at 4 stars. There are a few other sort of principles that we're really trying to emphasize at 4 stars that might have not been emphasized as much at 3 or especially 3 stars, but making classes sort of be more, making the differences be more significant, making them more well-defined. I think you can expect showboats, for example, to be even tankier than they are now. And I think strikers, for example, might be a little bit more sort of glass cannon type, if you will, maybe more similar to how they were at 2 stars, in the sense that their health won't scale as highly as, you know, certainly not as the showboats will, but maybe even less so than some of the other classes, to compensate for the fact that they do such massive gem damage with their primary gem color. Yeah, so really trying to make more distinctions, more, you know, significant differences among the classes to make them actually feel like they play differently. In my experience, there certainly are some differences that you can observe when you play 3 stars, but I've found that at the very, very top, to me, it feels like an acrobat with a choose move, and a powerhouse with a choose move, and a showboat with a choose move. It ends up feeling fairly similar how a lot of the gameplay goes. We're never going to like eliminate that, obviously, but still trying to make those distinctions matter a little bit more.
That's really great to hear, because I think, yeah, like you said, at 3-star gold especially, there's certain, where if you're talking about UF Seth or Brock Lesnar, next big thing, yes, Brock is going to hit harder with that choose move, but even with the kick out damage buff with Seth Rollins, you can win. You still win on turn 2 because you
Right.
can set up with the other move and whatnot, and it feels the same. Like it's just a different color, but it
Yep.
really feels the same. But I kind of there was, I think it was it the WrestleMania tour or maybe the anniversary, one of those events where we had to bring in certain characters to win like an entire node or an entire chapter, whatever it was. It kind of forced us to use some of the guys that we had still left at 2 stars. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, this plays so differently. I actually have to think, or I actually have to use some props. I actually have to, just the dynamic was very different. And it's good to see, or good to know that we can expect some of that dynamic to come back into the game where, I would imagine also if when you're talking about, the percentage of health difference that a striker is going to have, significantly less than, let's say, the average, at least compared to now. Things like that are really going to make the class advantages that much more important, because right now they're really not.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And just in testing so far, I think I've found that class advantages matter a lot so far
good.
at 4 stars. But yeah, that's one of the big components. And then one other one that I haven't mentioned yet is establishing a clearer, I guess, correlation between the move charge for each move and how much damage it's doing directly. Like the direct damage you see, like deal X damage and then change X gems into whatever.
Yeah.
I would say there's a loose correlation right now between how much it costs and then how much damage it's doing. But if you have a 15 MP move, I think that thing should be doing a ton of damage, like as a reward for charging that thing up.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely a part of this. It's not to say that like every 7 MP move will have this damage, every 8 will have this, because I also am trying to take account of like what the move does.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a choose gems and change to this color, then it's not going to, the move damage itself isn't going to be as strong as it otherwise would be, because you don't need as much move damage. You have the damage from the gems. So there's a lot of different components to it, but trying to reward you for moves that you've been able to charge despite having a really high move charge. Another one of the principles.
That's excellent. So it almost sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it would be easy to just say, okay, this is what the moves are at 3-star gold. This is what they would be at 4-star bronze, add some multiplier to it, and then add another move. And there you go, 4-star bronze character. But it sounds like you're going character by character, class by class, and adjusting each move accordingly to create the kind of balance that you are striving to achieve at 4 stars.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. We could just say everything goes 2x or 3x at 4 stars, but I think then you'd have gameplay that's very reminiscent of 3-star gold, and I don't think that is exactly what we're going for, right? So trying to improve upon what's good about battles at 3-star gold and trying to improve upon the things that are not so good. Definitely what we're going for there. And I'm not claiming that you'll find when you get your first 4-star characters, you're playing against other 4-star characters, that it's this perfect balance or whatever. But we're making a big effort to improve the balance and make sure that it's a lot more fun and that you feel like your choices matter a lot more.
Excellent. So if I may touch on one aspect of the question also, was, I know there's been some sentiment in the community about, a lot of people feeling like they've been struggling to get to 3-star gold, and now 4-star bronze is coming out, and the feeling of just being left behind a little bit. Now I understand, we haven't seen all the details of the upcoming event, and it sounds like there's going to be a lot of opportunity to at least get to that 3-star gold, if not beyond. But what would you say to the fan that's concerned about feeling left behind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a natural feeling, especially if you are just starting out or something like that. But I think that the live ops team and the design team together are coming up with a lot of ways to help people get up to that tier more easily than you could have in the past. What we don't want, certainly, it's not a great experience for anyone, is to have a huge disparity between players who just start the game and feel like they're helpless and can never get to that, to be competitive with other players in the game. So we're definitely making, I think, with the release of different hell mode chapters, with some really, really nice rewards. If you can get to those things, that's going to help you a lot. And then in addition, the event that's going on that the team has created, and I don't know all of the details on it. I've just kind of seen mostly what you guys have seen. But I think that a big goal of that is to help everyone sort of power up their rosters in anticipation for the release of 4 stars, so that everybody has a chance to get on a more level playing field, at least to get everybody closer to that new power tier.
Excellent. Yeah, I would definitely say that a lot of the recent events, and hopefully if get a chance to talk to the live ops team here on a podcast soon, that would be fantastic. But I really you got to give credit where it's due. Some of the recent events, the Dead Man event and the Hardy event, there have been a lot of great rewards, and those 2 characters specifically, if you got them, and a lot of people got them, was they're highly competitive.
Yeah.
So it's between the rewards and the characters, I think I would be much happier starting the game, let's say 6, 7, 8 months ago versus January of 17, where it was grind to get anything.
Grinding. Oh my God. Yeah.
I mean, so there's a lot more opportunity now than there ever was. And
this is true. Yeah.
As
yeah,
players.
I think, and I'll say, like, those guys, they put in a lot of work, and they, not every event is perfect, and not every event makes everyone happy. And that's expected, and that's totally normal. And they are always looking for feedback. They're always looking for ways to improve on the events. And I think they've done a great job with, like you said, some of the more recent events. It's been a lot of fun. I loved getting Jeff Hardy. I use him all the time in versus mode because it's absolutely a great troll move, just to swap out the Stardust and face the 2-star Gold Dust. I love it. But yeah, like they really do an awesome job, and they, like I said, they're always looking for ways to improve, and they do listen to the feedback that they get. And Eric does a great job of especially communicating that to them.
Quick question: whose idea was it to have that hot tag function for Jeff Hardy?
So that was I'll say that was a joint decision between me and the other guy who was working on characters now. We wanted to make sure that they had something unique as a tag team that made versus mode at least a little bit different. And we found out that it had issues with in singles matches, and that was the unfortunate part of it, was the bug. That's thankfully fixed now. But yeah, that was sort of a joint decision, and just playing with it was so much fun, and figuring out exactly what MP level made sense for how quickly you could charge it, and that sort of thing.
So is that going to be only exclusive to the Hardys, or will we see like similar iterations with other tag teams?
I don't know if I can say that it'll be exclusive to them forever. There's not a plan in the sort of immediate future to add it to another release, but I could certainly see it on another character in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So switching back to 4 stars, obviously we touched on it a little bit already, but the difference between the power tiers in this game is really significant. So like in 2-star territory, I remember back then showboats were really powerful in the sense that they had that extra health, which made a big difference, and strikers were somewhat marginal due to they had the high move charges and lower health. But obviously once we get to 3-star gold, strikers become kings due to gem damage, and showboats lost their relative benefits of extra health because they couldn't kick out of anything.
Right.
So you touched on this a little bit before, but is there anything you wanted to add to, with 4-star characters, which I know right now in 3-star gold, gem damage is really king, but in 4 stars, how is that going to really, the 3 factors of gem damage, move damage, and health, how is that really going to be balanced overall? Like, which would be the main factor in killing off your opponent?
I think that's really the challenge, is trying to make sure that there is almost that it's not one thing, that it's not just gem damage at 4 stars. That if you take a powerhouse, for example, you're relying heavily on their move damage. Their move damage, just FYI, is likely going to scale more aggressively than other classes will, just because that's supposed to be what they're known for. And when I look back at 3-star moves for powerhouses, some of their moves, even if they were 12, 13, 14, 15 MP, still weren't doing that much more damage than some of the other classes. So I would say that, if you take a powerhouse, then you're relying on move damage, and they're going to be strong because of move damage. If you take a showboat, they're going to be strong because of their high health, the strength that you noted about showboats at 2 stars. If you take strikers, they're going to be strong because of their gem damage. They're not going to be as strong because of their health, because that's going to be scaled differently, as I mentioned. So what I'm definitely going for is different strengths based on different classes, and so it's a challenge, but that's certainly one of the goals.
Excellent. So I would say in recent months, certainly since you've taken over, there seems, at least as a fan, that there's been an emphasis on making certain legendary wrestlers like Macho Man and Steve Austin and Undertaker Deadman and Mr. Perfect perform toward or at the top of their respective classes. Is that indeed the case, like a conscious decision on your part to do that? Absolutely.
With looking back at some of the superstars that we've released in the past, and either looking at the sort of where they ended up on the community tier list, or just internally knowing how they performed in simulations and things like that, I think that we when I first started in this position, I thought that we could do a much better job of sort of making sure that the sort of classic legendary superstars in the WWE universe end up getting the sort of love that they deserve,
Right.
and making sure that when we release a new Macho Man, that he is really strong, and that
Right.
he's somebody that you're going to be really, really happy to win and to use, and he's going to be fun, and he's going to be powerful, and that sort of thing. Same with Roddy Piper, another guy that I worked on, Mr. Perfect, like you mentioned, and that's challenging because there's obviously a balance to it, making sure that they're not too strong, making sure that and trying to find out exactly where they're going to land on sort of people's internal tier lists or whatever. That's not always like super easy to predict,
Right.
but I think that we've done a pretty good job overall of creating characters at the power tiers that we want them to be,
You
and
want them, yeah.
yeah, and where we expect them to sort of perform against other characters.
Yeah, and I think that's been something that I've really enjoyed seeing because, somebody like Steve Austin should be the best showboat. If he's a showboat, he should be right up there,
Right.
But unfortunately, we still do have pre-existing characters in the game. So how do you address somebody like Stardust, who is far greater in game than they were in real life, while still respecting the fact that most gamers have invested very heavily into those characters because they're top characters in the game?
Yeah, I think with any character that's been released, what we don't plan to do is sort of make them worse, make them objectively worse. That's never like a goal of existing characters in the game. I think one of the sort of goals at 4 stars is to improve balance so that a character like Stardust, there are a number of other characters that have been in the game for a long time that are very, very strong. With those characters, they're not going to be necessarily, just on a relative scale, they might not be as dominant as they were at 3 stars. They're still going to be very strong, completely viable have the same moves. Nothing's going to change about that. But maybe a big choose move doesn't end the match immediately, something like that. So I think making sure that the characters keep their strengths and keep what's strong about them, but improving sort of the overall game balance so that there are more interesting choices, and so that those not just one type of move ends up just outclassing every other type, is what we're going for.
So it sounds like it's not so much you're not going to nerf somebody, but at the same time you can evolve the overall gameplay in a certain way, and also introduce other characters with different skill sets that help in different ways, that just makes it less of a no-brainer choice that, oh, technician, Stardust, you have them, you have the trainers, just that's the one. It's more of a interesting decision based on your play style, what you value, that sort of thing.
Exactly. I think that with some characters like that, not only just the overall balance, I expect it to improve at 4 stars, but in addition to that, looking a little farther down the road, introducing different move mechanics or sort of secondary ability mechanics, like a trainer ability kind of thing, that could work to counter specific superstars, that makes it a little more interesting choice as to whether you use a big move like that at a given time. Like, I think you've seen in Hell mode the reflect mechanic, right, where an opponent might have a reflect ability for a number of turns, and you have to decide, okay, do I want to use this big choose move right now, when half of the damage or whatever is going to be reflected back at me, or do I want to wait until that effect is worn off and then use it afterwards? So introducing new mechanics in the game that make those, again, going back to sort of the choices and the player agency part of this, that make those choices more interesting and more meaningful. That's definitely something we're going for.
That's pretty cool. So taking all of this into account for 4 stars, like last night we read on the blog that you guys are considering redesigning Last Outlaw Undertaker, the Great One, The Rock, and another character to be determined. Are you guys going to do like a complete overhaul, or is it just like the new moves that unlock at 4 star that you're going to actually make them good, or are you just going to reset them at the prior to 4 star level?
I think it's with those characters, with those superstars in particular, the plan is to do a rework of their entire moveset.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. Because every character is getting a new move at 4 stars that will make them better in different ways, or make their moveset more dynamic in a different way, or more situational, what have you. But with those in particular, those are 2 among a few that we've identified that have sort of lower usage rates, or maybe lower win rates than we would like for a superstar of that sort of caliber. And in WWE history, having these superstars who were just some of the greatest of all time, not performing at sort of the level in game that we would expect them to, I think that an overhaul and an overall improvement is warranted.
Does this overhaul, I'm sorry, Vengeful, right quick, does this overhaul also affect their trainer ability, or just strictly moves?
That's a great question. That's not something that we have talked about internally. It's not a bad idea, but the primary focus has been on the move set.
Okay.
That's really great news. Really great news, because I think we all have our experiences with Last Outlaw Undertaker. So when I was a newbie at this game, I think I had this is before trainers, so there's at least that, but these guys are all at 4 star on my roster. I had Last Outlaw Undertaker, which I proudly paid $5 for.
Right.
And there was striker Seth Rollins, and there was Bray Wyatt. Right. Now, granted, I didn't know what they would become at 3 stars. Right. It was still early. But I looked at those 3, and I was like, I don't know who I should level. And I was not part of a faction that knew anything at the time. So I was like, well, all I can hear is the commentary from WWE, I guess from Michael Cole or whoever. Here's the Undertaker, the best striker in the game. I'm like, oh, I'm going to level up Undertaker. I quickly realized that he still sucked. So this is definitely good news. And also for The Rock, some of us, charge through the tour early on in the game cycle and managed to pick him up. All excited just to find out that he was absolutely terrible. Just
Right.
not worth not worth
Yeah.
rushing through. Like the lockbox was more useful than the rock. So so that's really good news, because again, like we're talking about earlier, Macho Man and Steve Austin, like they should be at the top. Well, so should Attitude Era Rock and
Yeah.
Undertaker toward the end of his streak. Those
Yeah,
guys
and
should be toward the top, if not the
and
top.
I think that's a great point, and a big reason why we picked those two first was that those are two superstars that players have either bought through the starter pack, or they might have won in the road when he was the final reward there, and that should be a reward. Those characters, those superstars should be strong. It should feel rewarding when you win those things. So that was a big reason why we picked those two. And what I would love to do, and I'll be working with Eric on this, is sort of I saw the thread that he posted on Reddit. It got a lot of really awesome and interesting responses on different other superstars that are worthy of a potential redesign. And I'm not sure exactly if we'll do sort of a vote or just sort of pick based on the feedback that we get there. But I would love to do one more that just sort of the players have a say in.
Yeah, I would almost say, if let's say you do one based on player feedback and it goes really well, I would even encourage, if there's another one that was really close, it might be worth considering that as well. Because let's say Goldberg is the one that gets the most votes, right? Obviously,
Sure.
He's way worse than he actually was.
Right.
But let's say somebody like Chris Jericho gets beaten out. Chris Jericho still deserves to be up there too. So,
Sure.
I would definitely suggest considering, multiple down the line, assuming the first one goes well, because I'm sure there will always be people that complain, but at least, some of these guys do deserve better showings than they were originally designed for.
Yeah, and I will say that that certainly has been taken into account with the new move that the superstars are receiving at 4 stars. Now that obviously requires you to take them to 4 stars to get that benefit, which is a pretty significant hurdle. And especially if it's a superstar who's not particularly viable at lower tiers, and taking them all the way to 4 stars. But this way, at least for every character, there's been a conscious effort in trying to make their move set, if it's not already viable, become more viable, and make it be a good reward for taking them all the way to the 4-star level. And then separate from that, we're looking into the sort of complete character overhaul, like for Last Outlaw and The Rock.
For sure. That's awesome. So I know this is sort of addressed in the blog post on 4 stars, that there was no plan to have trainer levels at the start of 4 stars or something along those lines. But are there plans to have trainer levels beyond 5,000, even if it's deep into 4 stars or 5 stars? And if so, are they going to be continuations of the current trainer ability, or kind of like a second trainer ability as you get further up?
I guess I'll say there's no plan to add a sort of second trainer ability. The plan at the moment is, after release, the trainer abilities are going to stay where they are. What we want to do is make sure that the game balance is where we want it, and that requires sort of leaving the trainer levels at the current state. I think that certain trainer abilities you will certainly see scale at the 4-star level later on, meaning in a later release with a sort of announcement that comes with it, perhaps like new trainer level or something to that effect. But what we want to do is make sure that we don't just raise Bray Wyatt now gives everyone 5 MP, and then
Right.
and then find out that might not have been a great idea. So that's something that we will be doing after, considering, I should say, after the 4-star release, and after we've seen kind of how the balance has shaken out, just to sort of do that a little more carefully.
Yeah, that makes sense. Not change too many factors at once that you can't
Right.
predict all of them anyway. So that's kind of for those, again, with the kind of worry about feeling left behind and that sort of thing, at least from the sounds of that, you just focus on getting your main characters up, and not have to worry about, also having to level up your trainers to the next tier, at least for now, which is,
Right.
to me, that's good news.
Yeah, and I would say definitely, once the list of moves is released, later during this event, take a look at what I'm sure everyone will be doing that, but take a look at what new move your favorite superstar, even if it's not one that you use right now, they could be getting a really awesome move at 4 stars that might just convince you to take them to that level, and instead of someone that you've been using a lot at 3 stars, because I expect there to be a good amount of change in which superstars are not in terms of like a complete change in which superstars who are good are still going to be good, but especially in ones that are not quite as viable right now, I think you'll probably see a lot of them become a lot more viable.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
Have you guys considered, or is it in the works to have like fuses for 4 stars, or is it purely just grind to 4 stars?
I think that's a great question, and it's probably one that's better for the live ops team.
Okay.
I think that it's certainly something that's technically feasible. In terms of the event itself, if you happened to get a superstar at the end of it that you already had, obviously that would be a fuse that gives you the 4 full stars. If you get somebody you don't have, it'll also be the full 4 stars. But separate from that, in terms of evolving and enhancing, it'll still be the hollow star pattern.
Okay.
Yeah, down the road, I could certainly see releasing opportunities for fusing up, but that's something that's probably better answered by the live ops team.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll talk about it more with them, but I would definitely love, at least for the characters that we pulled as megas, as full 3 stars, for no other reason than my OCD. I like my top row to be full stars.
Yep.
No hollows. I don't really care about the gem damage and health. It's just OCD. So another topic that I think that has been a lot of questions about, and I don't know, again, if this is really your wheelhouse or if you can at least touch on it, but up until 3-star gold, there's been a very specific pattern of token requirements for enhances and evolutions. With like, for instance, with going from 2-star silver to 3-star silver, or sorry, from 2-star silver to 2-star gold, that was the first time you needed 5 of the 3-star silver tokens. Similarly, to go from 3-star silver to 3-star gold, you needed 5 of the 4-star silver tokens. So if you were to kind of scale that up, the token requirements would be pretty drastic, especially given the current state of what hell mode looks like and that sort of thing. So is the pattern going to continue with going up to with 4-star gold and 5-star silver tokens in the future, or would you be moving to like a different pattern of token requirements based more on the state of the game today?
I think in terms of the pattern, you can expect the same kind of thing. I think later on, Eric will be talking about the specific token requirements. But in terms of the overall pattern, I would expect it to be similar. That said, I think that there is certainly there has been and will continue to be an increase in availability of some of those tokens that have been difficult to get in the past, whether it's 3-star silvers becoming more available on the daily tours, things like that. So I think that there will be opportunities. I think it's certainly going to be a challenge to get your characters up to 4-star bronze for the awesome reward that getting a awesome new move, I hope, and a really strong character. It's certainly going to be a challenge, but yeah, I think you should expect a similar kind of pattern.
Okay. Outside of anything that we've discussed to this point, what other aspects of the game would you like to see shift, you personally?
I think there, I guess a few things. I would like, we touched on it a little bit, but what I would love to see some more feedback on how your defensive team has done in virtually all sort of PvP game modes, whether it's versus mode or feud or you know, any sort of PvP mode. When you set your defensive team and you make deliberate choices to put certain trainers on and pick their moves, you know, I would love to see sort of how that played out. If not, like, I would love to see, like, personally, I would love to see a replay of how my guy beat some other player.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like feasible, and I'm certainly not promising anything like that. That's just something I would personally love to see. But I would love to see more feedback on stuff like that. I would love to see more game modes that encourage you know, a really broad roster. I think a lot of times, like, again, I think the live ops team has done a good job with sort of setting different interesting requirements. I think it was cool with the Creep Family Invitational recently, where, you know, they got to pick some of their requirements. I think that was pretty cool, and just seeing different superstars on your roster be emphasized in different ways. But I think that we could, you know, a new game mode that really emphasizes a broad and deep roster of superstars could be really interesting. And I think something like that might be on the way.
Excellent. That's pretty cool. And kind of an open-ended question here, a little bit more broader. You know, what's the ideal state of the game that you and the team are hoping to achieve in this game's future down the line?
I think, at least from my point of view, what I would like to see is, and I don't mean to be a broken record, but I would love to see your decisions make a big difference. That was something when I first started in this role. The characters, the superstars that I worked on, Razor Ramon and Eddie Guerrero come to mind. Those two in particular were ones where I wanted your choices to matter. Razor Ramon is, if you look at like the description of his moves, and it's like a wall of text, and you're like, what's going on? but once you like start playing with him and start figuring out how his moves work, I think it's really fun, and it's fun to try to sort of troll your opponent with setting trap gems in different places that result in this and that. There are some awesome videos that I've seen. I can't remember if that was Campitello or Jolie, but you know, the gameplay on that I think is a lot of fun. That was one that I really enjoyed working on. And so coming up with a state of the game where you feel like your choices matter, both in who you bring to a fight and into a match, who you know, what moves you pick, what trainers you select, when you deploy your moves, which gems you pick, all of those sort of things, so that when you win a match, you feel like not only have you sort of come all this way with your superstar and leveled them up and put all of the effort into putting resources into them, but also in that particular match, you made choices that led to a win, and that you feel like, you know, you earned that one. That from my perspective, just from the sort of character and meta part of this, is what I'm definitely going for. Yeah.
So, given the amount of hours you spend testing characters, developing characters, like, you know, back and forth, in and out, making sure everything is spotless, no bugs, every tactic thought out, have you ever watched a tutorial online and say, wow, I did not think of that, I did not know that was possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing, is that you know, we can play test a superstar internally. I can play 100 matches with them at 3-star gold. I can run, you know, computer simulations with them against a whole bunch of different characters and see how they do. But none of that compares to sort of the collective wisdom and insight and experience of like all of our players. And you know, obviously there are individuals who put out awesome videos and tutorials, but even just like seeing threads in Reddit, seeing discussions on wherever people have discussions in Discord or in their faction chat or wherever, where they're talking about different ways to win with different characters. That's the most that's one of the most rewarding parts of this for me, is seeing once you kind of throw a character out into the wild, seeing how what different ways you didn't even anticipate that players would find to use them, and like sometimes they find a way that's way stronger than you anticipated, and that's just how it goes. Sometimes this is a bit of a sore spot because I still think Jake the Snake could get a little more love from the community, but sometimes a superstar that I've designed who I thought was really strong in this moveset works really well. Players find that it's not as useful for maybe in feud or wherever. So like for me, that's one of the most rewarding things, is seeing how the players in general learn to use a character.
That's really awesome to hear, because I think a lot of the time, a lot of us, even myself included, we get lost in like the gameplay, or maybe we're having an issue here or there, and we kind of lose sight of that human element. And that's one of the things that Davey and I have really strived to bring to this podcast, is the people behind the names, and just the human aspect of playing this game, and to get your perspective as one of the main creators of this game, and hearing about how our interaction with the game is rewarding to you is really awesome to hear. And I hope that a lot of people would listen to this and have those constructive, interesting conversations, the thoughtful ones that bring us together, and also give folks like you on the development team a chance to really grasp how much entertainment you are providing us.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a game, and it's a WWE game, and we're all here because we like games and we like WWE. We like pro wrestling, that sort of thing. So seeing everyone interact in different ways, whether it's good or bad, honestly,
Right.
whether it's talking about why does this character have this move, or why didn't they make this guy stronger, all of it is what makes this this position and this experience amazing for me, and I hope that it does for you guys too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Now, I did want to mention a few things from the chat.
Sure.
There's a lot of love for Goldberg being improved.
Yeah.
A couple people think that I'm Edge.
Everybody thinks you're Edge.
Mama B's waiting for Elias.
Yeah. So am I.
And so, and actually I did have one question of my own that I wanted to ask you publicly. Are you going to save Bret the Hitman Hart?
So I think that all of the superstars that you've mentioned should receive good upgrades at 4 stars for sure. Goldberg is definitely a strong candidate for getting a very strong move at 4 stars. He's a character who, in my opinion, should be much stronger than he is. And I think the same is true of Bret Hart, and both versions for that matter. I think that the new gen version is one of my favorite, just sort of character looks in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I like both of them. I like Attitude Era as well, but that is, that's certainly a big component of 4 stars, is making sure that these characters who didn't get as much love or ended up not being as viable in the current sort of gameplay end game, I guess, making sure that those characters get some more love at 4 stars. What was the other question I missed, or was that most of it?
I think that was most of it. It was mostly, my favorite wrestler of all time, and kind of not so good, and he's kind of the best technician ever, and he's really not in the game. So
yeah, as a personal favor to you, I'll make sure that he gets great.
Wow, we out here throwing out personal favors now. No
You
love for
might have to
Devon
edit
Dudley.
that out, Davey. I don't want any rumors going around that Vengeful got his favorite character fixed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I take it back.
Hashtag blame Vengeful.
Blame Vengeful. Damn it.
He's getting a botch to silence move. Never mind.
Yeah, and of course, one of the big questions always is like, are we ever going to get Hogan?
Oh boy.
That is something that I just don't know the answer to.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably a lot of licensing and WWE decisions to be made there, not so much your team.
Yeah, I mean, the superstars from that era, I grew up on the sort of NES WrestleMania game. I played that game a lot, even though it was not, great. But it had like 6 characters. Hogan was one of them, Jake the Snake, Honky Tonk Man, Bam Bam Bigelow, and those are the guys that I really loved from that era, in large part due to that game. So, I would love to have all of the guys from that era in the game. I can't guarantee that or really speak to that too much, but personally, I'd love it.
That's awesome. So this is just a fun question. If you were in the game, what class would you be and why?
Oof, that's tough. I feel like I would be I feel like I'd be a showboat. Yeah, I love the. I'd probably wear something similar to like King of Kings, just some outlandish, something that makes me look like Shredder. Like I think that's probably what I'd go with. Just it goes with my persona. I don't know if you can really tell because I probably sound really subdued, and that's mainly because it's like 8 a.m. here. But yeah, I'd consider myself mostly a showboat.
Pretty cool. I think I'd be a showboat too.
Yeah, you would
Nice.
definitely be a showboat too.
What about you, V1?
Yeah, I mean, this is like going to be just a warning to anybody else that's going to be on the podcast in the future. This will be a question from here on out. This is the last question. Yeah, you know what? I would love to be a powerhouse or a striker, but really, I'm a technician.
Nice. Definitely a technician. Yeah. Okay, man, this was really cool to have you, Jeff. It was so much insight, especially coming off the major flood of announcements that you guys made last night. So I know the community is really going to eat this up and appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking time before your work day to spend it with us.
For sure, guys. I really appreciate you having me, and definitely look forward to seeing how this event goes, and then how everyone ends up enjoying 4-star superstars. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, man. Cool.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the time, my friend.
This is the DVO.